everybody, it's jrobi. I know it's been a long time since I put up a chess video, so I'm going to just throw one out there today and just kind of get the ball rolling again. I've had a lot of things happen over the last couple years. I've had some new additions to the family. Also, unfortunately, my family was absolutely nailed with the flood that hit Canada in 2013. Lost pretty much all of our stuff, and I've lost actually every single chess thing I ever had, including the rare Bobby Fischer book that I found. So that was several months ago. We're going through the rebuild now, and yeah, it's been quite the adventure. But you know, I think part of the thing from my end is I have missed making these videos a lot. So I'm going to get back into it, ease back into it. I'm also going to create a new channel for some extra content that I've been pursuing, just some fun stuff. League of Legends, things like that. So stay tuned. I'll let you know where that is for those of you that are interested. It's just going to be a completely fun channel. I'm just going to post just random stuff, probably not chess related. I'm going to keep this channel strictly for chess, but I thought, you know what, better video to start off again with than looking at one of my own personal games. I was playing black against my opponent. I think he was rated about 1748 at the time. He opened up with the queen's pawn. I get into a Dutch defense here. Pretty standard moves. Moving up my pawn here to keep an eye on the e4 square and the c4 square. My opponent attacks that pawn right away. I defend now by pushing my pawn up to e6. I have absolutely no problems in the Dutch defense taking with this pawn right away because the bishop's going to be keeping an eye on this pawn, and having two pawns here keeps a nice solid eye here on the e4 square. So my opponent does take, I recapture, and now he brings his bishop up now to e2. By the way, a much better position in the Dutch defense, if you're ever playing against the Dutch defense, is to actually fianchetto the bishop here onto g2. You'll just find that there's a lot more better games for white if you do that, as opposed to bringing out your bishop here to e2. So from here now, I just solidify my pawn chain, protecting the pawn here on d5, also opening up access for my bishop. And from here, my opponent brings his pawn now to a3. So basically taking the option for my bishop to come out to b4. Now, generally speaking, in all my Dutch defense games, I would never bring my bishop out to b4, but my opponent's obviously thinking about developing his pieces in the long run. Because usually, you know, when I play the Dutch defense, a lot of times players will try to do something on their queen side when they're white coming down against the Dutch defense. Doesn't generally work out just because of the way black has its pieces set up here. It's a very solid position, very hard to crack on the Dutch defense. So that's one of the reasons why fianchettoing this light square bishop helps in that endeavor later on in the game. So from here now, I just push my pawn up now to g6, opening up this diagonal here for my bishop. My opponent thrusts his pawn now to b4, so getting ready to develop some of his queenside pieces. I bring my bishop up now to d6. That's one of my favorite squares in the Dutch defense to have the bishop sitting. My opponent from here castles. Now if I just go back a step, you obviously know that this castle's coming because it's going to take such a long time to get this these squares cleared out to allow for a castle. And I don't think you'd want a castle on this side as white anyway. You don't have much protection from your pawns in this position here. So a very natural castle position here for white is just on the king side. So anyway, my opponent castles. I castle as well, and now he brings his bishop up now to b2. Now I just X'd off some squares here. This bishop is basically blocked on all angles that it has, so it's basically at this point taken out of the game. So from here now, I begin the attack. I push my pawn up now to f4. I'm attacking the pawn here on e3. My opponent does not capture, instead develops his knight now to d2. I take, so I'm attacking that knight. He recaptures. And now from this position, I bring my bishop up now to g4. So I'm putting a little bit of pressure on that knight. My opponent brings his knight down. And obviously I only have one move in this position because the knight and the bishop are both attacking my bishop. But one of the things that I want to point out in this position is I never want to capture this knight in this position. I don't want to open up access for this dark square bishop. So if at all possible, I'm going to try to avoid capturing this knight where it sits on e5. So I take the bishop here on e2, basically forcing the recapture from the queen. queen recaptures, and now I develop my knight up now to d7. Now I'm not going to take that knight sitting on e5 like I said, but I want to put some pressure on it and see what my opponent does. Now in this position, my opponent captures, and obviously he's attacking my knight and my rook. He's also opening up the lane here for his rook sitting on f1, so I obviously have to recapture that knight. But just take a look at the position now, and let's just compare black's position to white. So on my side of the board, I've got connected rooks. You can never go wrong with connected rooks. If you can get connected rooks at any point in the game, you're probably better off than having rooks that are not connected. So that's a plus. I also have my knight sitting here on f6. That's always eyeballing up g4. It can pounce over to e4. It could swing around to h5 and then maybe land onto f4 at some point in time. And then, of course, I've got my queen and bishop bearing down on those angles towards the castle position of the opponent. White, on the other hand, its knight's not horrible. Like, I mean, it can get into the action a little bit by coming over here to f3. This bishop, not so good. Obviously, it's blocked on all angles, and it's just kind of sitting here looking pretty. That's about all it's doing. My opponent does, however, have connected rooks, so that's good for my opponent. But now I've got some options, some flexibility. But my opponent plays rook up to f2, and I want you to take a look at this position and go ahead and pause the video and let me know what you would do in this position, because this was a mistake. So here you got your tactical shot. Now this tactical shot is characteristic of a lot of Dutch defense games if you go through them, but basically it felt right. It looked good, so I knew right away I just had to sacrifice that bishop, taking on h2, putting the king into check. From here, my opponent played king recaptures, but unfortunately for him, that just opened up this fork here. Knight pounces over to g4, forking the king and the rook. My opponent has to moves to g1, and I recapture with the rook in this position. And from here, it's pretty much all over. I think my opponent from this point in the game here, he just kind of fell apart and played some moves that were definitely questionable in that position. Probably wasn't too happy with the overall game, but that's how the game ended there. So let's go back here to the initial capture. So the bishop comes bearing down on that angle, takes on h2, puts the king into check. What would have been a better move for my opponent in this position? Well, my opponent had the option of just moving the king over to f1. From here, I still come in here with the knight to g4, but at least in this position, my opponent can move his rook up now to f3, preventing this. Like, he could have taken the rook, but that just puts him in check again, and there's going to be a lot of problems. So at least white in this position has the option of bringing the rook up here. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't end well. So you could just swing your rook over here to e8. Look at all the pressure here on the pawn on e3 and what's behind that pawn, but the queen. So in this position, the opponent has to take with check. I recapture, and from here, it would just go south for black relatively quickly, because we're going to get all that pressure leading up to that pawn on e3, and there's nothing that white's going to be able to do to stop this, and it's going to be down a substantial amount of material. So that's definitely a better option in the long run, because at least I have to play a lot more moves, so there's more of a chance that I'll make a mistake, right? Like, you never know in chess. You never know. I've had so many games where I've been down like a rook or like a knight or a bishop and managed to either get into a stalemate position or just managed to capitalize on a mistake that my opponent made. Yeah, so that was the tactical shot here. I want to go back a few moves here and talk about what might have been a better position for my opponent to take advantage of here. So let's see here. Yeah, right about here, after I've opened things up a little bit, my opponent could have tried something like this, pushing his pawn up to e4, making use of that pawn. In this position here, the best move for black is just to take. From here, white lands a check, black blocks with the knight, and white comes in and snags up that pawn on e4. It's not a terrible position for either side. It's just a heck of a lot better than what was played in the game that led to that tactical shot. Tactical shots always come from mistakes. There's no excuse for them whatsoever. If you make a positional error, then the chances of you opening up a tactical shot for your opponent are just definitely there. They're a lot higher. But anyway, so that was the position. I hope you got the tactic. I'm going to be coming up with some information on that new channel that I'm getting to. And I'm going to try to put content on both as I go. I've got a little bit built up content for the other one just because I've been taking it a little bit easy and having some fun with some other stuff in addition to chess. So anyway, take care. Hope you enjoy the video, and we will see you next time.